You may have tried your hand at disassembling an old vintage lighter that you wanted to repair. And when you took the striking wheel out, something like this fell out of the lighter also. And what the hell is it? How does it go back in? What's its purpose? These are called clutch springs, and they come in a variety of different sizes, shapes, cuts, thicknesses, you name it, right? But generally speaking, it's going to be a kind of rounded body. I'm going to zoom this in. That has a cut in it and is slightly bent like this, where you have one half kind of going to one side and another half going the other direction, you know? So if you have a lighter with one of these clutch springs, then you most certainly are going to have a flint wheel that, at least on one side, has this. It kind of looks like little stair steps, I guess you could say. The purpose of the clutch spring, to put it simply, is to allow this to spin in only one direction. The reason it is cut into two pieces and bent this way is because when you lay the clutch spring against the flint wheel and center it up just like so, you'll notice the piece that was bent inwards lays in that groove, and the piece that was bent outwards lays on top of those cutout pieces. And here's the idea. So notice when I spin this wheel, see that? It can spin in this direction, and when it gets to another cutout, it will sit down in that groove. But because that groove exists on the flint wheel, I can't spin it in the other direction. It can only spin in one direction. So the simple and quick answer of how it's oriented is the piece that bends inward sits in this groove and only allows it to spin in that one direction. Now, what's the other end for? Well, that gets a little bit more complicated. So typically speaking, the end shape of a clutch spring is designed to fit normally somewhere in the snuffer, the lid, the piece that moves up and down on a lighter and, you know, puts the flame out when it's closed and raises up to expose the wick. So let's look at a real-world working example. We have a gorgeous Ronson Princess here with a griffin on it. When we open this, you'll notice there's two pieces inside. There's the flint wheel, obviously, but then to the right of that, you see that little sliver of metal. That's the clutch spring. And the end of that clutch spring, just like this one, is tucked up into this snuffer cap, the piece that I'm moving right now. This end is tucked up in this snuffer cap, and it's kind of, you know, putting pressure on the inside wall of that snuffer cap because it's bent at that area where it's cut, right? And then your flint wheel's here. And so the idea is when you push on the striker and that lid raises, it's bringing that that clutch spring along with it, right? So when that lid raises up like so, that clutch spring is coming along with it. And as we know, that clutch spring is designed where the wheel can only move in one direction. And so what this equates to in the very end is that as that lid comes up, it's pulling that clutch spring with it, and that clutch spring, because as we know, it's bent and tucked into the grooves of that wheel, it's turning the wheel, right? But as we also know, it can only move in one direction. So when that snuffer cap comes back down, the wheel doesn't spin back with it. No, that piece just simply slides and clicks, just like we saw in this working example earlier. So You press the button, the wheel is spinning as the clutch spring moves it. It's struck, it's produced its spark, and you're done. Now you're letting the lid or the snuffer back down, and this spring is freely spinning, not spinning the wheel with it, and it clicks back down into place as it shuts, moving to the next segment of this wheel, and it's ready for the next strike. And the entire purpose of that, again, is so this wheel, you have your flint obviously down here pushing against it. This wheel can turn and spark, and then the lid comes down, resets. Turn and spark, lid comes down, resets. And it's basically so you aren't moving in two directions, you know what I'm saying? You aren't messing up your flint by having it grind against it this way, then grind back against it when the lid closes. That's the entire purpose for these things. So the lesson here is that when you disassemble a lighter, look inside first before you start taking out screws and kind of try to look for one of these. And when you do, take it apart really carefully, keeping pressure on the spring so that stuff doesn't go flying, and try to pay attention to the way that this piece is already in there when it was first assembled at the factory years ago. And if it falls out unexpectedly or you aren't sure, just use the shape of it and, you know, that action that we saw here, and you can figure it out kind of using context clues in that way, which way this is supposed to sit, and even still from that, which way the wheel's supposed to sit in there. Every once in a while, generally speaking, you're gonna see the clutch spring on the front side of the lighter, but I have seen, and you will encounter ones where it sits in there backwards like this and the clutch spring is on the other end. But all you have to do is just pay attention to the way that it's bent, lay it up against your wheel, and see which way it needs to be flip-flopped so that the wheel can turn and click one way, but can't move in the other. And then make sure your other end is tucked up into your snuffer cap or wherever it may go, whether that's the snuffer cap or the lever. Make sure it's tucked back in so that when it's moved, it can bring that clutch spring along with it and turn the wheel. And I hope that kind of demystifies what the hell these things are, how they go back in, and what their purpose is. I know when I first got into collecting lighters, this was the very, very first thing I ever researched. What the heck is this and how do I put it back in? So I kind of hope that this explanation helps you guys a little bit. And as always, see you on the next video and hope you enjoyed it.